Deadlink is awesome, and I really think that you should give it a shot. Now, I would say that it feels like it's a crime that this game isn't getting that much attention, but there is one deterrent that comes to mind when I think of why people aren't playing this game. Deadlink is a, wait for it, indie roguelite. No, wait, hold on, guys, it has a grappling hook. Oh, come on. Now, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't initially confused with how this game works, despite its tutorial. I got an early access code for the game a while back, and I jumped into the tutorial without reading too much about the game, and I had no idea that it was a roguelite from this tutorial sequence. I skipped over some prompts. I didn't exactly read everything that was given to me because I thought that I understood it, and that was one of my first mistakes. Despite all this, I would still go in for 20 to 30-minute sessions at most, and still had a pretty great time, and that was before everything clicked for me, in which every run I've had since then has evolved into a symphony of armor shard pickups, rockets, and gauze cannons. Ever since the mechanics of Deadlink began to fall into place for me, I haven't failed a run up until recording footage for this video, which I guess is both a criticism and a compliment depending on your perspective. Yeah, there's a lot of indie roguelites out there, not to be mistaken with roguelikes, which there is a lot of overlap between the two genres, but don't let it fool you, it's not a roguelike, it is a roguelite. Most of these games all share the same flaw. Your success is often determined by the drops that you find in your run, and skill doesn't really play too much of a role in the grand equation. And it'll feel like that's the case in the first few runs that you make in Deadlink. You're going to get your ass kicked and you're going to feel underpowered, but that felt like a deliberate choice to get you familiar with the game, wet your whistle per se, so that you go back to your base between runs, pick up some permanent upgrades to give yourself a better fighting chance, and eventually you reach that comfort zone where you start to feel like the tutorial is finally over. And I say this because a lot of the perks and upgrades that you'll acquire in a Deadlink run don't exactly feel like they're making up for a player's lack of skill, instead using the upgrades and implants that you collect along the way to ignite different parts of your brain and change how you approach an arena. Now, there definitely still are some flat stat upgrades, but we'll get to those in a minute. One of the reasons I accepted the early access code for this game without even really looking at it was because of just how gorgeous it looked and sounded. The visual design isn't exactly what I would expect from a AAA studio, but the sound design and eventually gameplay once I tried it felt like something created by a group that's been doing this for decades. The colors and visual presentation reminded me a lot of Risk of Rain 2, which I think felt right at home with this sort of cyberpunk themed shooter that they were trying to create. Now, I'm not going to be covering too much of the premise and lore of this game just quite yet, purely because the game is still in early access. Some things are going to be bound to change, and so far the lore seems a little too deep. I know that this sounds hypocritical after my previous Ultra Kill video, and to that I say, shut up. The important part is that our protagonist, if I can compare it to anything, jumps into action a lot like the Tenno from Warframe, connecting to a remote-controlled war machine to chip away at this universe's evil forces, starting with the Tora Yakuza and later moving on to the Phoenix militaries. These machines that we're connecting to remotely are called shells, so when I'm talking about shells later in the video, keep in mind that I'm not talking about shotgun shells, I'm talking about these robotic bodies. And here's the important part. The gameplay loop is incredibly addicting. I've already unlocked the final perk tree in the base, at least I'm assuming it's the final upgrade tree, and I'm about as determined as I was when I first started to understand the game to go through and try to unlock every single one of these perks. Now, will I end up doing that? Probably not. I've been putting a lot of time into Fallout 2 recently, and kind of want to go back and replay Fallout 1 now that I understand the game more, but that's a subject for a different video. At the very least, I'll go back in to get the perk Bloodshot, which I'm pretty sure is named after my buddy and friend of the show, Bloodshot 9001, the same guy that ran Doom Eternal at GDQ. He's a good guy, go check out his channel. I didn't tell him I'd shout him out, so I hope he doesn't find out. The important thing to know is that each of our shells come with 2 different weapons and 3 abilities, or I guess 2 abilities each, and they both also have grenades acting as a 3rd ability, but both of the shells have grenades. Maybe one of the shells in the future won't have grenades, I don't know yet. Your loadout is tied to your shell. You're not going to be able to mix and match parts, at least not yet. So the soldier shell will always have the rocket launcher and shotgun, and the hunter shell will always have the arc gun and the revolver. I like to call it the invisible bone. Do you really wanna taste it? Combat feels a lot like exactly what game you might think that it feels like, and that game is Doom Eternal. I compare a lot of arena shooters to this game. I try to make sure that these are positive comparisons, and in this case, it definitely is. Deadlink makes sure that you're in charge of your own resource management, something that I love about action FPSs like Doom Eternal, and even some non-FPS games. Mega Man X comes to mind, assuming that you're actually using the alternate weapons. And Deadlink is no different, with an interesting twist on it. So ammo for your primary weapon is always infinite, but still needs to be reloaded. Your secondary weapon doesn't need to be reloaded, but does have limited ammo, and the only way that you can refill ammo for your secondary is through these C-balls. Ha! C-balls. The C stands for C-balls guarantee you secondary ammo, and for a while this is going to be the only method of refilling your secondary weapon until you acquire some implants or perks later on that may let you do so. This is a great way to encourage the player to move about the arena, if not moving for the sake of outmaneuvering enemies, then to refill your ammo at these C-ball locations, which yes, do respawn, so you can kind of hide out in the corner if your playstyle allows for it. But tagging enemies is arguably one of the most important parts of combat. Okay, it's as simple as this. If you use one of your abilities, including your grenades in this example, an enemy will be tagged. You can tell an enemy is tagged whenever they look kind of hazy, like they're glitching out of the matrix a little bit. When an enemy is in this state, killing them will drop armor shards. If you're not tagging enemies with your abilities, you're not gonna survive into the next arena. At least into later arenas. You could probably get away with it with the first couple. Combine that with this absolutely bitchin' soundtrack, and this turns into an addictive slaughter that still hasn't lost its charm for me. Now, arenas in the same level are always going to kind of feel the same. There isn't a ton of variety in the arenas, especially with this sharp angled level geometry, but it feels diverse enough to not get boring before the level ends. The amount of possible movement tech with the soldier's grapple hook alone can make this same arena feel fresh for multiple playthroughs. At the end of each encounter, you're given a choice between multiple rooms, credits, XP, or tokens that can either be spent during your run or in between runs at headquarters. You'll even eventually come across weapon modifiers and shell upgrades that completely change how your weapons can work, as well as your shells respectively. You can also unlock the privilege to do challenge rooms from an upgrade you can purchase at headquarters, but these are usually just a tougher enemy encounter and never really felt too difficult for me. But most importantly, and arguably most frequently, you'll encounter neural boosters. So implants and neural boosters usually come with two effects, a passive effect and an active effect, requiring 1 or 3 units of powers respectively. Sometimes they don't even require any power, and you can put them onto any slot, but the slot that you put them on is the most important part. See, you can put these upgrades onto your abilities, on weapon swap, or on C-ball break. The passive perks don't really matter to what I'm about to describe. As long as you have enough charge to equip the upgrade, then that passive is yours. But that active ability is only activated depending on what ability you put it on. For example, if you have a neural mod that increases the damage of your grenade every time an active action is taken, you can put that onto swapping weapons, onto either of your abilities, or on C-ball break, meaning that every time you swap your weapons with a 1-second cooldown, I'm pretty sure, you're buffing your grenades, and that can stack up to, I think, 7, depending on the mod, might be 10. Or if you really hate yourself, you could put it on a larger open slot, so this effect would take place when you break a C-ball instead. This is really cool, and is a great solution to just giving you flat upgrades, flat percentage bonuses, etc. that I've seen in other roguelites. Now, you can just exclusively focus on mods that you know that you're going to use, which wouldn't affect your gameplay loop at all. But I feel like you're gonna get the most fun when you get the implants that completely change how you approach an arena. Even then, if there's a perk that you don't like or you end up not even using, you can sell these at a vending machine whenever you find one. Even if you never encounter the choice for a vending machine, you're guaranteed to find one before the level's boss. Now, this is the part of the video where I dive into the content available in Deadlink, but despite the 10 hours that I've put into this game at the time of writing this video, there's only 2 levels available at the moment. I know, this really doesn't sound like a lot, but you just need to play it to understand. It's definitely worth it. This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of interesting classes for anyone who likes to learn, gain new skills, and improve themselves. If you've been trying to learn a new skill and just haven't found the ways to do it, Skillshare could be the ideal place to begin. From photography, illustration, and graphic design to general freelance knowledge and more. Everyone is certain to find classes to match their goals and interests. Last month, I told you about Jordy Vanderput's course on advanced video editing for Adobe Premiere. Premiere. Just minutes into that course, I was learning tips and tricks that I had no idea about in the decades plus I'd been using this program. And since then, I've been moving my panels around, even moving them onto different monitors separately, which really streamlined my editing process. I can actually thank Skillshare for helping my video output on this channel without them having to pay me. But thank you anyway for the sponsors, guys. You're the best. Self-care can also be just as important as your hobbies, and Skillshare is here to help you improve your ability to unwind and relax. With Skillshare originals like the Ultimate Self-Care Playbook by Jonathan Van Ness, Plants at Home by Christopher Griffin, and Writing for Self-Discovery by Yasmin Cheyenne, you can put yourself on track to recenter after a hard week of work. New courses are added every week, so there's always going to be something to learn, all available in closed captioning from English to Spanish to French to Portuguese and German. If you'd rather try it before you buy it, then the first 1,000 people who click the link in the description or pinned comment will be able to try a whole month free of Skillshare. Just think about all the great stuff you could do in the span of a month. To get started, just click the link in the description or follow the link that's on screen, and you'll be right on your way to beginning your journey into Skillshare. Thank you again for sponsoring this video, and I'll see you again next month. The first level focuses around the Tora Yakuza, a deep blue Neo-Tokyo sort of trope city, complete with giant robots and sex clubs. That's cool. Arenas begin with weaker foot soldiers, eventually working up to the same weaker foot soldiers building up an armor meter, represented by the color orange, to later sumo pressure units who need to be taken out from the backside, either with splash damage or a stun from your shell's kit. Oh, but these ninja enemies though, these guys I feel like could be a bit better. They're so sporadic with their teleportation, which I don't have a problem with on its own. I just feel like something like some more audio cues could make it a bit more bearable, because at the moment all they have going for them is this fancy teleportation graphic, which does look pretty cool. I'm pretty sure it's a mix of particle effects and some textures, but I feel like their presence could be made a bit more obvious. These sort of RoboCop robots definitely look like they would be a threat, but I've actually never had too much of an issue with them. And as you'll learn pretty soon into the game, it's generally a good idea to have some kind of electricity weapon at some point, just because you're going to be dealing with a lot of robots in the second stage. But the first boss, the Tarantula Spider Tank, I love that name, is definitely gonna be this game's biggest filter. For about the first couple hours of my time in Deadlink, a majority of my deaths came from this first boss. And in retrospect, I think I was just kind of bad at the game, but I always felt like no matter what actions I took, I was always getting hit by his laser beams. I think that they were specifically set to hit you if you are going faster than your walking speed. I think it's supposed to keep you grounded. I'm not sure. I need a bit more testing with that. But I got around this by using the soldier's grapple to just launch myself into the air, landing behind another stack of crates on the other side of the arena, all while tagging some lower Yakuza so I can refill my resources. But ever since the first time that I beat that guy, I have never died since, period. Not even to anything in the second level or any future attempts where I got what I would call bad RNG. There really isn't such thing as bad RNG in Deadlink, in my honest opinion. I have intentionally chosen worse or at least lesser upgrades as a way to neuter myself and still finished my run with, I wouldn't say no problem. I could still had a couple close calls. But point is, I've only died to this guy once ever since. I kind of lied to you. I did the method that I described earlier where I grappled to the other side of the arena and then got stuck in a corner where I got pinned down by the boss and had no way out. Sure, go ahead and say, oh yeah, that kill totally counts. I mean, it totally did. But that felt more like a death from just being stupid rather than not knowing how to play the game or a lack of skill, you know? The second level focuses on Phoenix militaries, some super corporation with its own PMCs that I'm pretty sure they made German just so that they could put Achtung on the door that starts the level. Look, I understand that this is just German for watch out, but on the very basis of it being an FPS, it feels like a deliberate reference to Wolfenstein. Yes, go ahead and say that I think that everything German is a Wolfenstein reference. That's not what I'm saying. You know that's not what I'm saying, but I know that you're thinking it. Despite this incredibly expensive PMC that we're up against, they don't always feel that different from the Yakuza that we were just fighting. The biggest difference comes from some of their heavier units, like these hammer guys that just keep rushing you, but I usually have some kind of tool to keep me away from these guys. I'm never really at a hindrance when it comes to just running away. And while I'm at it, level 2 goes on for, I think, think a little too long. This might be one reason why I think the boss at the end of this level is so easy for me. I am so stacked from the upgrades that I'm collecting that I just become a walking war machine through the rest of the level. I'm already stacked with upgrades, and this boss mostly relies on melee attacks. This is a movement-focused shooter, and it is incredibly easy to just launch yourself from one side of the stage to the other, regardless of what shell that you're using. And the more open yet closed-in arena that this boss has makes resource management a lot easier than the level before. If you peeked out of cover to kill some fodder Yakuza during the Tarantula fight, you're probably gonna get hit by a stray laser. But with this dude, you're lucky to get hit. I don't know, I don't think that they should make the level shorter per se, but maybe make the boss a little bit tougher. And I think that this is also because you've probably changed out your secondary weapon at this point. So you don't get a new secondary weapon, I'm not lying to you there, but you can find weapon modification rooms that completely alter how your secondary weapon works. You can still apply an elemental modifier to your primary weapon or affect stats like firing speed and reload speed, but your secondary weapon is completely changed. The rocket launcher can be turned into a fire elemental grenade launcher or a slower straight moving projectile with the electric buff. Meanwhile, the hunter's arc cannon can be turned into a couple other things, but also a Quake style lightning gun. And that is my favorite thing in this game. I would not be surprised if this thing gets nerfed. You're going to start the game with the soldier's shell, something that I think most arena shooter players are going to grasp pretty easily. He's armed with a shotgun, rocket launcher, grappling hook, and a sort of scrambler AoE that stuns and tags every enemy that it touches. Now, I know that some folks are getting tired of grappling hooks being in every arena shooter lately. Shadow Warrior 3 even makes a fourth wall joke about this trend, but it's familiar, and it could definitely help folks understand the game better before jumping into the more complicated hunter shell. The shotgun is slow and bulky with a long cooldown between firing and reloading, but I feel like this is intentional to encourage weapon swapping from early on. Yes, you don't have a lot of rocket launcher ammo, but you can easily switch between them, negating the cooldown between each shot. Even then, just with this first starting shell, you have a lot of options. The rocket launcher will give you a push in the air even if you don't exactly rocket jump per se. It's kind of like the ballista or the Gauss cannon from the newer Doom games, but you do get some extra velocity if that explosion still hits you, so you can rocket jump and launch yourself around the arena. And movement in the air is a lot like classic Quake in a way. I know it more so from source games like, you know, TF2 surfing and all that, where if you want to steer left and right, you're holding down A or D on the keyboard and turning in that respective direction. It is a lot of fun. You can fire the grappling hook onto an enemy and strafe with it almost exactly like the meat hook from Doom Eternal. I'm gonna blame Mayo for this one. Even if you don't want to do anything too complicated with the air movement, you could still grapple onto a C-ball that's littered around the arena, and they don't stop you right in the air. You keep flying in that direction, and it is awesome. It's become my favorite way to enter an arena and get myself out of a pickle. Now, the hunter model, which you'll unlock later on, is a bit less movement focused, but a lot more complex. The only movement tool in their kit is the sort of teleporter swap. Again, to compare this to Warframe makes me feel like Loki. This makes escaping enemies a lot easier, but a bit more tactically required. And unlike the soldier, where I'm basically using all of my abilities as soon as they're available, assuming that I have an enemy to use them on, I'm saving the hunter's cloak and decoy for whenever I'm in a tight pickle. Now, you do come out of the decoy when you attack. That part kind of reminds me of the spy from Team Fortress 2. But enemies are usually still too distracted by the decoy to actually attack you, even when you're fully visible. I don't know, it's kind of funny. The hunter's marksman is really fun to fan the hammer. Well, you're metaphorically fanning the hammer, you're just firing it really fast in actuality, but also has bonus headshot damage to it, rewarding you for taking that extra quarter second to get a headshot off with good aim. And the arc cannon, I'm pretty sure can penetrate as many enemies as you would realistically encounter in a single shot, firing this wide beam that passes through a large group of enemies. Even if you don't upgrade this thing to the lightning gun, it is pretty awesome. And that's about everything that I have to say about Deadlink. I hope that I've been able to convince you to give it a shot and support the devs if you can. For the record, they didn't ask me to. I just played the game early on, thought, wow, this game is amazing, and I wanted to personally do what I can to make sure that it's getting more attention. I can't wait to see what comes out of this project when it comes out roughly a year from now in 1.0. Now, granted, timelines are bound to shift. I wouldn't be surprised if they delay this game just to get some more work done on it, but assuming nothing catastrophic happens, I will be there to support this game every step of the way. I look forward to following up with this game a year from now once it's finally released in 1.0. That's gonna be it for today, ladies, gentlemen, and NBs, and I will see you all hopefully not too far from now. Hey, thanks for watching the video. I know that this is a much shorter video than I usually make, especially recently, but I wanted to get back into making these shorter form content reviews to sort of fill time in between my longer projects, which I have a few more that I want to finish before the end of the year. If you enjoyed it, please let me know in the description. Please let me know in the comments down below if you want to see more of this shorter form content. This means that I could probably get to more modern but shorter game reviews to fill time in between that some of you have been asking me about. And remember that if you want to go support me, my editor, or my artist, go pledge to my Patreon and join this list of names off to the side here. And if you pledge more than $10 a month, you get to have your name read out loud by me, joining a cast like Catgirl Sky, Thickless Mage, Mumbo45, SSG Meathook, Shine Spark, Dante Bishop, Nickel, EMC Mend, Dragon XRD, Silk, I Am the Pokemon Master, Otaku de Carnitas, Pixel Pockets, Slim Jim's Media Bin, EMT Neutrino, and Chef Kilo. Thank you guys so much for your continued support, and I look forward to seeing you soon. All right, have a good night, everybody.